Haven't done a morning one in a while. I got my eyebrows done, so I'm pretty pleased about that. But let's get straight into it. Understanding and perception. As you learn to listen deeply to other people, you will discover tremendous differences in perception. You will also begin to appreciate the impact that these differences can have as people try to work together in interdependent situations. You see the young woman, I see the old lady, and both of us can be right. You may look at the world through spouse-centered glasses. I see it through the money-centered lens of economic concern. You may be scripted in the abundance mentality. I may be scripted in the scarcity mentality. You may approach problems from a highly visual, intuitive, holistic right brain paradigm. I might be very left brain, very sequential, analytical, and verbal in my approach. Our perceptions can be vastly different, and yet we both have lived with our paradigms for years, thinking they are facts and questioning the character or the mental competence of anyone who can't see the facts. Now, with all our differences, we're trying to work together in a marriage, in a job, in a community service project to manage resources and accomplish results. So how do we do it? How do we transcend the limits of our individual perceptions so that we can deeply communicate, so that we can cooperatively deal with the issues and come up with win-win solutions? The answer is habit 5. It's the first step in the process of win-win. Even if, and especially when, the other person is not coming from that paradigm, seek first to understand. This principle worked powerfully for one executive who shared with me the following experience. I was working with a small company that was in the process of negotiating a contract with a large national banking institution. This institution flew in their lawyers from San Francisco, their negotiator from Ohio, and presidents of 2 of their large banks to create an 8-person negotiation team. The company I worked with had decided to go for a win-win or no deal. They wanted to significantly increase the level of service and the cost, but they had been almost overwhelmed with the demands of this large financial institution. The president of our company sat across the negotiating table and told them, "We would like for you to write the contract the way you want it so that we can make sure we understand your needs and your concerns. We will respond to those needs and concerns, then we can talk about pricing." The members of the negotiating team were overwhelmed. They were astounded that they were going to leave the opportunity to write the contract. They took 3 days to come up with the deal. When they presented it, the president said, "Now let's make sure we understand what you want." And we went down the contract, rephrasing the content, reflecting the feeling, until he was sure and they were sure he understood what was important to them. "Yes, that's right. No, that's not exactly what we meant here. Yes, you've got it now." When we thoroughly understood their perspective, he proceeded to explain some concerns from his perspective, and they listened. They were ready to listen. They weren't fighting for air. What had started out as a very formal, low trust, almost hostile atmosphere had turned into a fertile environment for synergy. At the conclusion of the discussion, the members of the negotiating team basically said, "We want to work with you. We want to do this deal. Just let us know what the price is and we'll sign." Then seek to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Knowing how to be understood is the other half of habit 5 and equally critical in reaching win-win solutions. Either we define maturity as the balance between your courage and consideration. Seeking to understand requires consideration. Seeking to be understood takes courage. Win-win requires a high degree of both, so it becomes important in interdependent situations for us to be understood. The early Greeks had a magnificent philosophy that is embodied in 3 sequentially arranged words: etho, pathos, and logos. As suggested, these 3 words contain the essence of seeking first to understand and making effective presentations. Ethos is your personal credibility, the faith people have in your integrity and competency. It's the trust that you inspire, your emotional bank account. Pathos is the empathetic side. It's the feeling It means that you are in alignment with the emotional thrust of another person's communication. Logos is the logical, the reasoning part of the presentation. Notice the sequence: ethos, pathos, logos, your character, your relationships, and then the logic of your presentation. This represents another major paradigm shift. Most people in making presentations go straight to the logos, then left brain logic of their ideas. They try to convince other people of the validity of that logic without seeking first ethos and pathos into consideration. I had an acquaintance who was very frustrated because his boss was locked into what he felt was an unproductive leadership style. Why doesn't he do anything? He asked me. I've talked to him about it, he's aware of it, but he does nothing. Well, why don't you make an effective presentation? I asked. I did, was the reply. How do you redefine effective? Who do they send back to school when the salesman doesn't sell? The buyer? Effective means it works. It means P/PC. Did you create the change you wanted? Did you build a relationship in the process? What were the results of your presentation? I told you he didn't do anything. He wouldn't listen. Then make an effective presentation. You've got to empathize with his head. You've got to get into his frame of mind. You've got to make your points simply and visually and describe the alternative as alternative he is in favor of better than he can himself. That will take some homework. Are you willing to do that? Why do I have to go through all that? He asked. In other words, you want him to change his whole leadership style, and you're not willing to change your method of presentation. I guess so, he replied. Well, then I asked, just smile about it and learn to live with it. I can't live with it, he said. It compromises my integrity. Okay, then get to work on an effective presentation that's in your circle of influence. In the end, he wouldn't do it. The investment seemed too great. Another acquaintance, a university professor, was willing to pay the price. He approached me one day and said, Stefan, I can't get to first base in getting the funding I need for my research because my research is really not in the mainstream of this department's interest. After discussing his situation at some length, I suggested that he develop an effective presentation using ethos, pathos, and logos. I know you're sincere and the research you want to do would bring great benefits. Describe the alternative they are in favor of better than they can themselves. Show that you understand them in depth. Then carefully explain the logic behind your requests. Well, I'll try, he said. Do you want to practice with me? I asked. He was willing, and so we rehearsed his approach. When he went in to make his presentation, he started by saying, now, let me see if I first understand what your objectives are and what your concerns are about this presentation and my recommendation. He took the time to do it slowly, gradually, in the middle of his presentation, demonstrating his depth of understanding and respect for their point of view. A sincere professor turned to another professor, nodded, turned back to him, and said, You've got your money. When you can present your own ideas clearly, specifically, visually, and most importantly, contextually, in the context of a deep understanding of other people's paradigms and concerns, you significantly increase the credibility of your ideas. You're not wrapped up in your own thing, delivering grandiose rhetoric from a soapbox. You will really understand. What you're presenting may even be different from what you had originally thought because in your effort to understand, you learned. Habit 5 lifts you to greater accuracy, greater integrity in your presentation, and people know that. They know your presenting the ideas that you generally believe, taking all known facts and perceptions into consideration, which will benefit everyone. I'll take a pause there. Excuse me for the sniffling. My nose is a little runny right now. But another way to really emphasize the importance of listening and truly understanding, but from a win-win perspective, I think that's something that I really didn't even think about the last couple pages or the last couple videos that I've been doing, is that the idea that in any given situation, if you're really trying to understand someone, or want an objective or result of something, listening is another big proponent of a win-win solution. And that first step is to understand, then to be understood. And I think in the win-win habit 4 idea around when you want a win-win situation, you are really trying to understand the other individual in any given time, really try to get to the bottom of what their needs and wants are, communicate what their needs and wants are, and see if you guys are on the same page. Then counter what you want or what your needs are so that you can be understood as well. And I think this is what the this what I just read is about. I mean, not only in making deals, presentations, but I assume it would also be in your personal life. And it talks about ethos, pathos, and logos, how you can use this framework in your presentation. And let's see if I would start to use that presentation style, ethos, pathos, and logos. But I'm also curious to know if you can use this in your relationships, where the ethos is showing your credibility, and your pathos is showing your empathetic side, and the logos is showing the logical side. So the ethos would be, someone would come up to you and say, oh, I'm coming up to you with a certain problem, and I trust you, you have the credibility, I know you can give me great advice. The pathos would be, okay, now that I've listened to you, let me give you a form of communication or piece of advice that leads to a logical result or logical reasoning to your situation, if that makes sense. So yeah, we'll move on to what it looks like to be the closing of habit 5, and then we'll move on to habit 6. So yeah, have a good rest of your day.